It's been a while since we've had a female technician on the HVAC Know It All podcast. So today, out of Cali, we have Rachel Samala. Now, if you're on the Instagram, the gram, Insta, whatever you want to call it, she goes by Miss Mini Split. So we are going to talk about a mini split installation. She's been in the trade for quite a while, and she's got some tips and tricks and stuff that I've never used. She likes Nylog. Awesome. We're going to find out if she uses a torque wrench or not too. So we'll get into that conversation, installing a mini split with Rachel Samala. Let's go. This is the HVAC Know It All podcast. I'm your host, Gary McCready. This podcast is sponsored by Cool Air Products, Master, Cintas, and SupplyHouse.com. Go to the show notes and click on the links to check these guys out. All right, Rachel, the first question I'm going to ask you is, how did you come up with the name Miss Mini Split?
I was doing a lot of mini splits at the time.
Yeah.
And I was trying to think of an Instagram. I decided to make an Instagram. And I just happened to be doing mini splits. And I was like, oh, that sounds catchy. That's what I came up with.
Cool. So we're going to talk, the audience that's listening right now, we're going to talk about the installation of a mini split. And Rachel and I will go through it together. And if you guys are newer to the trade, or you're just looking for tips to make your installs go a little bit better, I'm sure the conversation will help with that. So you got a car seat in the back of your work truck. Explain. So obviously you have a young child and you got to maybe drop off to daycare or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Once in a while on your way to work?
Yes,
okay, cool.
That's exactly the routine.
Okay. Now, I've seen a post where you actually brought your kid to work.
Yes.
How did that all come about? Because that's interesting to me, right?
Yeah, so I made my Instagram Miss Mini Split in the summer of 2023. By that time, I had already been doing HVAC for like 10 years.
All right.
And before that, I've just been out here doing my thing, not on social media. But I think I was pregnant, or I had just had my baby. Yeah, that's right. I was pregnant with my second kid by the time I made my Miss Mini Split Instagram. And so I was kind of like working part-time. And the only reason why I was working part-time was because I had already been working full-time for a bunch of general contractors. I had all these customers, and I told them, and I tried to keep telling them, I'm not working right now, and they would just beg me, say, please come, just bring your baby, it'll be fine. And I'm like, I don't really like doing that. But, sometimes some customers, you just got to take care of them. So it got to the point where I was like, fine, I'll just bring my kid. And I would bring my mom with me, so she would kind of help watch my kid. Sometimes it was as young as 3 months old. So she would be there watching the kid while I work, and I'd take a break and, I'd take care of my kid, change her diaper or feed her and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Interesting. The struggles of being a mom sometimes, huh? I get it.
Yeah.
Well, I shouldn't say I get it because I'm not a mom, but I got 3 kids of my own, so I get
you have empathy.
the whole I get the whole family dynamic and having to balance your life and struggle and make sure that your kids come first, but you also got to work and maintain a living and to bring in that income so you can buy food and like a home and a bed for yourself and your kids and stuff too. So I commend the fact that you worked that hard to make it work. So pretty cool. Now, where are you located? You're located in California, right?
Yeah, San Diego.
San Diego. Okay, cool. So when it comes to, you're doing a lot of mini splits. So is that side of the industry taken off a lot in California and San Diego, like the mini split side of things?
Yes, definitely. And the reason for that is because of the housing crisis out here. And because of the housing crisis, there's a huge push for affordable housing. Well, if you want affordable housing, you have to build it affordably to begin with, or else you can't rent it out for an affordable price. And so part of that is finding affordable trades, affordable HVAC systems. And so there is a huge demand for mini split systems right now out here.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense because if you think about a centralized system going into a unit or whatever it is that how they're building or dividing the spaces, ductwork and all that, then you got a frame around it, and you know what I mean? That costs a lot of money. Like I was just speaking to somebody that they got a 1,400 square foot home that they're building, and the quotes to get ductwork and a furnace and all that in AC is upwards of $20,000 or more.
Yeah.
Now you could throw in a mini split for way less than that, right?
Exactly.
So it makes sense what you're saying. So it's a lot more affordable to the general contractor that's putting it in. And the thing with a mini split these days is they're very reliable. Like the technology behind it, they are like the rotary compressor. They got the inline suction line accumulators to prevent liquid slugging. I mean, the fact that they speed up, slow down, like inverter technology that's involved in them, I think really helps as well, because you don't always have to have a straight on when it comes to load calculations. You don't have to be right on the money because they got a range that they can operate in. So do you have anything to say to that? Is the quality and just sort of the reliability of the mini split these days? Because I find they're quite reliable.
Yeah, definitely. Especially the ones that are in central HVAC systems. It doesn't really matter if you get a Ream or a Lennox, like today. The quality of installation is what matters, right? And so we say, as you know, it's like 95% the quality of install and 5% brand. But in mini splits, the brand matters the percent a little bit more, because definitely I've noticed that the cheaper stuff doesn't really last as long and doesn't perform as well once it has, for example, I saw a Daikin that was installed 15 years ago in a kitchen, and it was just covered in grease, and that thing was still going. It was it's still working, pumping out cold air. But if you put one of these, $200 mini splits in, and it like stops working, as soon as the filter gets dirty. So
yeah,
there is a little bit more.
I got you there. Okay, so then what's your mini split of choice then when you're installing? What do you prefer to install? What do you find works best?
Right now, I'm installing AC Pro, and that's because I've found that I think that there are definitely other brands out there that are legitimate to sell. That's just happened to be what I fell on. Their price point is affordable, but the quality is really good. I just think that it's a really good value. And most people the reason why they're trying to go mini splits is to save money. So it's like, what's the point in offering something? The Mitsubishi costs 2 or 3 times what AC Pro does. And at the end of the day, they do the same exact thing. I mean, Mitsubishi definitely has its time and place, but for the average homeowner who just simply wants to be comfortable and, doesn't really need or maybe can't even afford, the value that Mitsubishi offers, that's why I go with AC Pro.
Okay, a couple things on that. Mitsubishi, I have nothing against Mitsubishi as far as their equipment goes. I think it's top-notch, high-end. I think because they had the market for so long, and the name Mitsubishi has been superior. They charge a little bit more, I think, because of that. Exactly. I am finding some of the other brands are starting to catch up as far as the quality goes. And from what I hear, it's partly due because there are people that were with Mitsubishi that helped design all these systems, and then they leave and they go to other places because they're basically like a headhunter will be after them and say, come work with me. Let's design a system over here. And they leave and they go to other places and they start bringing the ideas and the technology to other places. And it kind of equalizes the playing field a little bit more. And when you do that, it creates more competition. And if you can build a somewhat equalized piece of equipment and quality, but it's cheaper, it's probably going to win if word gets out that it works just as well. Now, I do want to ask you, AC Pro, who manufactures that? Do you know? Because it's probably Gree or Medea, I would imagine. Do you know if it's one of the two?
Yeah, all of their equipment is either Gree, Medea, or Lennox.
So AC Pro is made by all three of them and they just slap their name on it?
Yeah, it just depends on which series that you get.
Okay, cool.
But I found that the AC Pro G series seems to be better engineered than actual Gree products. I've installed the Gree brand, and it's just not as installer friendly or service technician friendly, I've found. In terms of where, getting your screw gun to get the screws out, and like their air handler, you have to undo like 40 screws to get the blower out of the air handler on a Gree air handler.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, I've never done that.
Yeah, it's really annoying. and, just like weird stuff like that.
Yeah, considering that Lennox manufactures AC Pro, there's the first thing that came up when I Googled who makes AC Pro. The first manufacturer that came up is Lennox, it says. So I didn't know Lennox manufactured their own stuff when it came to mini splits. But you know what? The world of who makes what these days, it's hard to follow. It really is.
Yeah.
Because,
It's
I mean,
constantly changing.
Yeah, because they're like Train, Carrier, so on and so forth, they could all slap their name on a mini split brand or a heat pump brand, but it's not actually made by them. It's made by someone else.
Yeah.
So it's hard to follow these days. So let's go through a typical install, and hopefully the audience can learn with us. So, I mean, obviously, the first thing we got to do is mount the outdoor unit, the indoor unit. Now, I have found, and you can let me know what you think, and you're probably in a different boat because we have to mount our outdoor units 18 inches off the ground because of snow when it comes to heat pumps. You guys probably don't have to do that in California, I would imagine, but we have to do that here because if we get like an inrush of snow,
right,
and it kind of drifts up onto the unit and it's blocking airflow and stuff like that, that's a problem. So mounting it, I like to mount it on a stand, but a lot of times they're mounted on a wall. How are you mounting yours? With brackets? Or are you using any like L brackets or specialized brackets? Because like for Diversitech, Erector Seal, they've all got their own sort of mini split hanging brackets, right?
Yeah, I try to do on the wall as much as possible because I think it just looks the best. It's the most out of the way. It's very secure as opposed to putting it on a pad on the ground. Our regulation is 3 inches off the ground here.
Okay. All right.
But I don't really like the instability of putting it on a pad. They're not as heavy as like a condenser. So I feel like they're more, I've never actually seen a mini split outdoor unit topple over. Anybody will knock it over. But you could just tell it's not as secure as being on a wall, right? Or as a 200-pound condenser is when that's on the ground. Like that's not going anywhere,
Yeah.
You could crash your bike into a 200-pound condenser and, there's a chance it'll be okay. But if you crash your bike into a mini split, then it's probably not going to be okay.
Yeah, could fall over. So are you bolting when you fasten to the wall, are you bolting the unit down to the brackets itself?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
With the rubber isolators?
Yeah, it comes with like these bolts. The bracket comes with bolts so that it's pretty secure in there. And one of the ways that I like to secure it to the ground if there's concrete is by using it's called a red head. I put a red head in the concrete and then I put it's like 3/8 all thread on the top, right? And then I put a bolt and then a washer and then the foot of the mini split and then another washer, another bolt. Actually 2 bolts below it so that you don't have it acts as a locking nut. So that's one way I like to do that on concrete.
I've never seen it done like that before. That's interesting.
Yeah,
so instead of on a pad, basically it's sitting up on threaded rod.
Yeah,
is
exactly.
what you're saying. Oh, okay,
yeah,
cool.
Exactly.
Is that common in your area to do it like that?
No, it's not common, but I actually learned that from the Fujitsu manufacturer. That's actually in the Fujitsu air stage manual to install it that way. Yeah. And so that I just started doing that on all my mini splits on concrete whenever I can, and it makes sense. Yeah.
I would love to see a picture of that. You could, if you want, can you send me a picture of that? Because I'd love to see it.
Yeah, I actually did post that on my Instagram, so I'll scroll back and try to find it. It's kind of hidden. It was It was like the background of a different post. The post wasn't about the install.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. So mounting it. That we've covered that, but the thing that I want to bring up is that do customers ever complain when it's attached to the wall about micro vibrations or anything like that coming from the system?
I have never had anybody complain about it. It doesn't seem to be, they're so quiet and smooth. Unless there's
they are quiet and smooth, yeah.
Yeah, unless there's something wrong that shouldn't really be vibrating that much or making too much of a noise. And then, the back of the wall brackets have that rubber pad on it too.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, so there's rubber pads on the feet and then there's rubber pads on the back of the wall bracket if you're using that. So it's good for isolation. So funny story, I installed a Toso unit, which is made by Gree, a couple years back now, I guess about 1.5 years ago. And it had to go under a window because it was the only place feasible to run the piping, and the homeowner said, put it here because I don't want piping running all over the walls of my house to get to where they got to go. And we covered it. We used the Rector Seal like pipe cover. So we covered it going in, and it looked great. But if we moved it somewhere else, it would be going all over the wall. And he's like, I don't want it. And my wife would kill me. He said, if it's going all over the wall. So we put it under the window. And the comments on that post, especially on Facebook, were nuts. He's like, look at this hack putting this unit under the window. And I'm like, what's the big deal? Do you know how, I guess some people don't understand how quiet some of these mini splits are. You can barely hear them when they run, right?
Yeah.
And that's what you were just saying. Like, your customers are not complaining because they are so quiet in operation, right?
Right. Yeah. The only complaint I've ever had on any inverter was an X Series 5-ton that I installed on the ground. It wasn't even on the wall, but the line set ran inside of the wall. But this customer is just a very, very, very picky customer.
You get those, of course.
Yeah. And it was still very quiet.
Okay. So, I mean, it's very simple to install a mini split. I know that, I think it was some people in Australia that were going on about how electricians there can now buy them and install them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow. I mean, that's crazy. But here you can buy them off of Amazon.
Right.
And install, and they have the whole kits, like the Senville ones that you can buy. I don't know if you've seen Senville, but Senville is a big name here. Like, if I Googled mini split heat pump on Amazon, Senville is the one that comes up the most. So you can get the full kit. When I started my company, some guy messaged me. He's like, will you install this? Because I can't get warranty unless it's installed by a professional contractor. Now my policy is I don't install any equipment that's bought by a homeowner. I don't do that whatsoever. But I did it then because I needed to start generating cash flow for the business. So I did it. But where am I going with this again? I forgot my
I think you were talking about how anybody can buy it and install it now versus probably the quality of installation.
Yeah. So I was going to say it's easy to install a mini split. It is and it isn't if you know what you're doing, right? I mean, let's talk about
Mr. Cool makes it look really easy on their advertisements, but I have yet to find an amateur mini split install that I would say, oh, that's pretty good.
Well, of course, because amateurs don't understand and know how to install them. The thing with Mr. Cool is that the line sets are pre-charged. So all the extra line set is just bundled up somewhere, right? It looks ridiculous.
Yeah, exactly.
Somebody asked me to go out and finish an install for them at a cannabis grow operation. And I went out there and it was a disaster. Like, they bought these, they weren't Mr. Cool, they were something else, but it was the same concept, pre-charged line sets. And they mounted all of the outdoor units themselves. They ran all the piping themselves, and it was just dangling. It wasn't fastened to the wall, nothing. It wasn't covered. And they're like, yeah, we just need you to come over when we're done and just hook them up to the unit, make sure they run. And I'm like, not really. Like, it wasn't something I wanted to be part of. I'm like, the install's 90% done. What do you need me for to make the connection and turn them on?
Yeah.
This is not something I do. This is kind of a waste of my time. Anyway, let's talk about piping one in if we're just running a line set, because there's a couple of things that we need to be mindful of. On a true mini split, the metering device is actually in the outdoor unit. It's not in the indoor unit.
Right.
Like in VRF, it's different. And a lot of people don't understand that. And I didn't know that either when I was going through the trade. I'm like, why does the liquid line have to be insulated? And they're like, no, it's not a liquid line. It's actually like a vapor / liquid line. It's actually part of the evaporator.
Like a distributor.
Right? Yeah, it's basically, that's what it is. It's a long ass distributor is what that is. So when you run your piping, let's talk about getting to the flare portion of that, because running the pipe through a wall is easy. When you're doing your flares, what tool are you using?
I've been getting a lot of hate for some reason for using the spin bits.
Oh, have you?
I've made thousands of flares with the spin bit and I haven't had any problems. Actually, I've had less problems using the spin bit than I did when I was doing hand flares. And I mean, I'm pretty good at doing the hand flares too, but they just turn out better, faster. Faster being the key word there. I mean, you're sitting there like cranking the thing, I back it off, crank it again. back it off, crank it again. And the spin bit, you're done in 7 seconds.
Yeah.
So why would you
Now,
not do it that way? And it's the same thing as doing the hand. So I don't understand what the problem is. And is that the reason why it's better is because the spin bit heats up the copper, and then when it's hot and you make that connection, then it really creates like it's like when you it's like it like melts it together, that it's
I
soft.
see what you're saying. It kind of the soft copper kind of molds to the connection of the brass.
Yeah.
And I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, the spin bit I've never used before, so I can't even speak to it. Have you ever checked the spin bit with a gauge? You ever seen those flare gauges that you can get? It's just basically a piece of metal with holes in it.
Yes, yeah, and you can gauge it. I never have because I don't use the gauge. I've never used the gauge in my entire life. I should have when I first started, but in the beginning when I was learning, I didn't even know about that. But by the time that I even found that, I was already good at making flares and doing mini splits. And the way that I learned to check the gauge was by taking the flare that I made and putting it up against the brass and making sure that it was an even circle. And I think that everybody should use the gauge. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I just learned how to do it without the gauge. But
yeah,
definitely people should use it, especially if you're in beginning and especially if you haven't made thousands of flares. I mean, at this point, I pretty much never have a leak, because I've just made so many flares. So, I mean, I know that, I think that
I'm looking up the spin bits. Go on with your thought. I'm just looking up the spin bits because I want to check something.
I just bought the Nylog one, and I'm about to install like 30 mini splits on this apartment complex that I'm doing. And so I'm going to see how that turns out. I'm looking forward to it.
You will absolutely love the Nylog one. It's fantastic. I have it. The only reason I wanted to look up spin bit is because I don't
even know if that's what it's called.
No, it is.
No, it is. Yeah, that's what I thought, but I wasn't 100% sure. I just know it spins.
They're called Spin. They're actually, the name on the box is actually called Spin.
Yeah.
Spin flare tool. I wanted to see. Oh, it does say 45 degree. The only thing I didn't know is that because for 410, everybody says, okay, it's got to be a 45 degree flare. But according to this little blurb on Amazon, it says it makes a 45 degree flare. So I guess it does. That was my only question, if you knew that, but I've just found that out on looking it up online. So that's cool. I've never used one before, but if you're finding it works for you and you don't have leaks, I mean, more power to you. I think you're going to really love the Nylog one, though, for sure.
I actually learned about it from another HVAC influencer who, HVACR videos years ago.
So the Nylog tool you'll love, and you found it through who? Sorry?
HVACR videos.
Oh, okay. Cool. Yeah, I got that thing. I think I was one of the first people to get it because I work with Nylog closely and I test all of their stuff for them. And I think I got that thing last January, so like almost 2 years ago now. And the thing's phenomenal. Everybody that purchases it and uses it says it's one of the best tools they own. So I think you're going to really enjoy it.
Yeah, I have not heard a single complaint. I've only heard the best reviews about it.
Okay, so the flare nut obviously has to go on before we make a flare. That's a mistake I'm sure you've made before, because I have too. Not putting it on and having the perfect flare. But my next question is, are you a Nylog girl? Do you put Nylog on your flares?
I do.
Do you believe in it? Oh, you do? Okay, perfect. Okay, so have you ever encountered a problem with Nylog causing an issue with the system?
I've installed thousands of mini splits with Nylog, and I've never had a problem. Why would you? It shouldn't be getting in the system. It's only on the threads. Maybe on the backside of the flare.
Even if it does, I've got a video. It's POE oil. I've got a video with John Pastorello, who's the CEO of Refrigeration Technologies, and he's got a beaker and it's got a magnet stir, so it's constantly stirring. And he squeezes a whole bunch of Nylog in there, and within seconds, it's it's homogenized with the oil. It's the mixture. You can't tell it's even in there. So you put yours on the threads. I put my Nylog on the seat where the brass and the copper meet up. That's where I put mine. You put yours there as well? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Cool. So at that point, are you using a torque wrench? Are you torquing it to spec per the manual? Or do you have like the hand torque nailed down pretty much?
I have a torque wrench.
Cool.
I used it dozens of times when I first bought it and in the beginning of doing HVAC. When I first started doing HVAC, it was just, sometimes you do mini splits, sometimes it's HVAC. Anyway, I used it on several mini split systems in the beginning of my career. And I found that every time I torqued it down to spec, it would still leak a little bit.
Really?
And so I would have to always hand tighten it a little bit more. So now I just don't even bother using it. And I don't want, maybe you should delete that part out because I don't want people to think that they shouldn't use the torque wrench.
But maybe it was a problem with the torque wrench. Maybe it wasn't calibrated right.
It could have been, yeah.
Because and I don't think we need to delete it because that can be a specific. It's just like using a combustion analyzer that's not calibrated right. You're not going to get the correct readings. I've used a few different kinds, and I've encountered that once or twice where I kept going and going and going and going and going, and I'm like, this is over tightened, and it still hadn't reached its torque yet. So I think there was actually something wrong with that specific wrench. So it's always good to check it and maybe even get it calibrated once in a while. They're not that expensive. So instead of getting calibrated, you just possibly just get a new one. But
yeah, I didn't even think that.
So let me bring up a time. Okay, so I installed a VRF system a couple years back, and the 1/4-inch lines on that, I didn't use a torque wrench on it. Okay. Because it was really, really tight to get into the spot that I was in. And a few of the 1/4-inch lines leaked on a pressure test. And they leaked because I over tightened the shit out of them. Like when I took it apart, the flare was like, it was gone. It was like there was no flare there left. So we had to redo them. I used the NavVac tool, and then I torqued every single one of those to spec. And I'm like, wow, that's all it needs. And I'm like, it's hardly anything with 1/4-inch, right? Because it's something that it's very delicate, that piping and the wall thickness. So I did all of them to spec, and I didn't feel like it was enough, but I'm like, okay, if the torque wrench says it's good, then I guess we'll leave it there. And pressure test is 600 PSI, and it was fine.
Well, see, that's what using the torque wrench taught me is that the torque spec is, when you do it by hand, it doesn't feel like it's very tight. So that's what I do now is that I basically barely hand tighten it. Then I do the pressure test. And if it needs a little bit tightening, I just tighten a little bit more. Backseat, tighten it, And then at the end of the day, it doesn't leak,
Mm-hmm. So what are you pressure testing to then? You're saying you don't get leaks. What are you pressure testing to?
About 500, 600 if it's something like an air stage.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool.
The lowest I'll go is 400, 450 if my tank is running low or something.
Yeah.
And it's a small system.
I've made posts before where, like, if your flare's 45 degrees and the copper's not all like scratched to shit inside and all that, if the copper's nice and smooth inside, it's a 45-degree flare. Use a little bit of Nylog on the seat and then torque it to spec. Again, I can say that I've never had a leak doing it that way either. The leaks come from improper flaring and improper torquing mostly. The Nylog is there as like almost like a liquid seal, like almost an insurance. It fills any micro gaps or any micro scratches or anything like that. Because, I mean, the copper and brass will expand and contract. So if you do have like little micro gaps or anything like that, during that expansion and contraction, you can get little leaks by it. You may not see bubbles, but over the course of time, you could lose a few ounces of refrigerant that could cause an issue with the performance. So I'm finding that the Nylog helps to fill all those little gaps. So I'm glad you use it, and I'm glad you haven't encountered any problems over thousands of mini splits, right? So evacuation. What about evacuation? How do you set that up?
I do direct to the vacuum pump. I don't think I have ever vacuumed through my gauges in my entire life.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting because I just want to say that's interesting because I started doing it through the gauges, and I've only started doing directly in the last 5 to 6 years or so. So interesting that you've never done it that way.
Yeah, I think that there are definitely times and places where you would, especially in refrigeration. But I've always been in the position to just be able to hook it up directly to the pump.
And then do you stop at 500 microns? Or are you trying to get right down to like below 250 or 200 or anything like that?
Well, usually what I do is I'll pull it down pretty much as far as it'll go. So if it'll go below 500, but if it gets down to 250 and it won't go down any farther, then that's where I stop, Yeah, I pretty much let it bottom out every time. If it's a new install, then that shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, well, I mean, why not? Oh, of course. That's what I was going to say. Like, if it's a new install on a short line set, you can, with a one hose system straight to the pump, you could be down there in less than 5 minutes on some occasions, depending, right?
Yeah, and this X series that I just did was, it's a 3/4 inch line set, and it was over 50 feet long. And that pulled down to like 27 microns in an hour.
Yeah.
Tops.
Wow. Okay.
Maybe 45 minutes.
What size of hose are you using attached to the pump?
That was, I think in that case, I had a 3/8 ID. Or was it a 1/2 inch? I think it was a 1/2 inch ID. And one of my refrigerant hoses. Because I didn't have another black hose on me at the time. I wanted to pull down on both sides. So yeah, I used a refrigerant hose and a black 1/2 inch hose.
Okay, so you did from each side. Okay, so this wasn't a mini split with just one connection point then. This was a bigger system.
Yeah. This one was, the X series is an inverter heat pump, but it was for central.
Oh, central unit? Okay, cool.
It was for central, yeah.
Do you do many central heat pumps?
It's the same technology,
Yeah, of course, yeah. Yeah, of course. Do you do like a lot of centralized systems as well?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but I pretty much only install inverter central systems. I don't do any single stage ACs anymore.
So who's helping you on your jobs then? Because this is your own company, right?
Yes.
Okay, so who's helping you do all this? Do you have apprentices with you or other technicians?
Yeah, right now I have an installer.
Okay.
And I have a young lady who reached out to me for an apprenticeship, but we haven't really gotten that going yet, but I'm trying to get that set up for her.
Nice. Okay, cool. So you do have an employee that helps. I mean, so being I'm a one-man show, but mostly what I'm doing is commercial service. So it's easy to be a one-man show doing commercial service. Where I get in a jam is where if I have to do something residential and I got to do heavy lifting, then I have to pay someone, sub them out at their full charge out rate to come help me. So that's a bit of a pickle, but I've seemed to kind of been able to navigate through that. But it's the only thing that I come into that causes a bit of an issue for me. But I despise installing residential. I'll do mini splits. They're super easy. You don't really need a helper for a mini split. But when it comes to ducted central mini splits, yeah, you do need a hand because those things are not light. Those things are pretty heavy, right?
Nobody should be doing a residential install by themselves. I've done it. It's a lot of work for just one person.
Oh, yeah. Trust me.
Yeah.
Trust me. I was going to say, I've had you for 40 minutes. Like I said, mini splits are very easy to install, but the thing that I wanted to get out of you is how you're mounting them, because it could be different locations. And that threaded rod trick, that's interesting that you pulled that from a Fujitsu manual. We got the fact you're flaring with spin bits. Now you got the Navac using Nylog. Great. No leaks. So you have no torque wrench for you. You got the hand tight thing down pat. So if there's anything else you want to throw in about the installation of a mini split that might be unique to yourself, or that you maybe a tip or trick or something like that, then we'll head out after.
Yeah, I have two things in regards to, one of them is in regards to mounting. Another way that I like to do it, especially on a roof, is putting them on those, what are they called? They're like black, it's like a black rubber with unistrut installed on top of it.
Oh, just like I call them sleepers.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, but you know what I'm talking about, right? And then you can put the threaded rod on that sort of thing.
Yes, you
Yeah, I
can.
like to use those as feet. And then when I'm doing the indoor, I have a saying. You know, there's that saying, measure twice, cut once.
Yep.
My saying is, think thrice, measure twice.
Think thrice, measure twice. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you do not, you can measure it out, but if you didn't really think about it, even if you get it exactly where you want, and then you make that hole and you start, putting screws in to mount that mounting plate and you get it all up there, and then you realize, oh man, I should have done it center between the door and the window, not between the wall and the wall. Now it looks off. You know what I mean? That
Yeah.
sort of thing.
Yeah. When it comes to the indoor side, it's got to be aesthetically pleasing too for the customer as much as possible, right?
Yeah.
You ever seen those? Who made them? Was it LG? It was actually like a picture frame. It was like a picture frame, but it was actually thin split head that you could put any picture you wanted in it. I'm like, those are bizarre. I've never actually seen one installed. Have you installed one of those before?
That had a lot of bad reviews.
Did it?
Yeah.
Okay.
The airflow, I think, was not good on those, is from what I remember, the complaint was.
Bit of a gimmick. I think they designed it because people were like, I don't like the look of that thing on my wall, right? So
yeah, exactly.
Anyway.
It's a great concept.
Yeah, it's a cool concept. I like the concept of it, especially if you can get like a nice picture in there, like a family picture or something that you enjoy looking at over a mini split head. It's a nice concept for sure, but if it doesn't work, I mean, what's the point?
I think LG needs to stay out of the air conditioning business.
Oh, ooh, that was a slam.
And I've got a reason why.
Okay, what's that?
I went to work on an LG, and the way that they had designed the service valves was that once it was installed, you can't get a wrench. There's like the equipment, and then there's like the liquid line. It's not really liquid line, but then there's the suction line in front of it, so you can't get your wrench into the liquid line or whichever way it was. You had to remove if it was like leaking in the back on the back connection, there you couldn't get a wrench in there. And I had Mac wrenches. Those are like, very, very thin, very durable, high quality wrenches specifically they're like mechanics wrenches for getting in behind things and being able to turn it. Man, I could not turn that nut to tighten the leak without taking off the front one because they're just too close together. They were too crammed in there. And I was like, they didn't test this in the field. Nobody thought about this one.
That's
access.
That's bizarre. Yeah. Access is very important for installers and service, especially service technicians coming back later, because it's going to be serviced a lot more than that was installed. Hopefully the install is only one time.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool. All right, Rachel, I'm going to let you go at this point because, like I said, I kept you for about 45 minutes now. I have to run and do some things as well. But this has been great. I've enjoyed talking to you and getting to know you a bit. And we could probably do this again at some point, maybe even include you on like a multi-panel discussion one day, because, I mean, you got some insights and good ideas and stuff like that. So I like it. Cool.
Thank you. That'd be fun. It's been an honor to be on one of the OG HVAC podcasters.
You trying to say I'm old when you say OG?
OG, like original gangsta?
Yeah, I know. I'm just kidding. Yeah, no, I really appreciate that for sure. And I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today for sure.
Thank you.